Welcome everyone to Build Fix episode number 2. This is my new monthly series, the spiritual successor to my monthly build series that ran for many years. It's a pretty basic premise. Viewers like you have sent me parts lists either for new builds or builds they're looking to upgrade. I'm going to go over those builds today and offer my advice on how to fix them. Gently and constructively, of course. And I'd like to say a big thank you to PCPartPicker for sponsoring this series.
Excellent!
Today's video is brought to you by the Paul's Hardware store on paulshardware.net, the only official source for Paul's Hardware merchandise. Tantalizing t-shirts, brilliant beer sets, high-quality hoodies, and more, all featuring the classic thumbscrew for tasteful and refined viewers, or the 8-bit thumbscrew for tasteful and refined viewers who hate curves. New designs are added sporadically and at random, so head over to paulshardware.net and get some of that sweet, sweet merch right now. Or not right now, after you watch the video. Either way. Before we dive in, here's how this whole thing works. About a day ago, I posted this on the YouTube community page, and a bunch of people replied. And I would like to say thank you to all the replies, and one common recurring theme I found amongst these replies was a lot of you are good, like you're fine. Your systems are perfectly okay, and I was like, there's nothing to fix here. That said, I was able to pick out a handful that I think I can offer some good advice for, and these are all listed down in the video description, as well as links to the PCPartPicker builds lists, as well as links to the parts that I'm recommending upgrading to. Our first build was sent over by NoobSniper, and I think we've all been there. They sent me a direct link to a Canada PCPartPicker list, so we're gonna be looking at Canadian prices. And if you noted in my community post, I was asking what monitor, specifically the resolution and refresh rate, people are playing with. So NoobSniper is looking at 1440p gaming. I'm going to assume you're going for higher refresh rate, like 144 Hz or better with that, as well as some dabbling with 4K video editing. And here is the parts list in question. We have an Intel Core i5-12600K paired with a very nice Peerless Assassin air cooler. This is a white themed build with a Lian Li LAN-cooled 215. We have an MSI Pro Z690 motherboard, 16 gigs of Corsair Vengeance memory, a couple 2TB NVMe SSDs, 750 watt power supply, some extra fans, and yes, he directly linked the monitors down here. So we are looking at 1440, 170 Hz. So we will want to make sure in terms of gaming performance that we have a graphics card that can keep up with this resolution and refresh rate. I found it interesting that quite a few people said, I have 2 monitors and they have like 2 gaming monitors with high refresh rates, which maybe he started with the 1080 and then added the 1440. Personally, if I was going for more than one monitor, unless I was like trying for a wraparound like multi-monitor gaming setup or something, in which case I would want all the same monitor, I would opt for like one high refresh rate gaming monitor, and then I go for like a good color depth IPS or something like that for the second one. Note that we do have a total build cost down here, but that's not exactly accurate because some of these products don't have pricing available. That said, I think in terms of gaming performance, what's probably going to be holding you back a little bit, not a whole lot, because this isn't necessarily a totally out-of-date graphics card, but I think you could get a bit more performance than the RTX 30 Ti 8 gig with some cards that are available now versus a couple years ago when the 3060 Ti 8 gig was a bit more in season. If you were purely focused on gaming, I'd say just upgrade your graphics card, but since you're saying you're doing some video editing as well, then the weak link becomes, I think, a little bit your processor, since you are just working with a 10 core, the i5 versus like the i7 level. And then we've also paired that with a DDR4 based LGA 1700 motherboard, which means you have to use DDR4 memory. And this was absolutely recommended a couple years ago when this platform first came out. DDR4 was a lot cheaper. However, DDR5 prices have normalized a lot, and for video editing, I would say you absolutely want more than 16 gigs of system memory. Now, because I forgot to ask people for their budgets in that community post, I don't know exactly how much money you're working with, so I'm gonna offer 2 solutions. So the most cost-effective way to upgrade the system would be to upgrade your memory kit, and I would say don't try to get another of the exact same kit to add to your motherboard. Just get rid of this kit entirely, sell it, whatever you can, and go with a 2x16 gig memory kit for 32 gigs total, or potentially even a 64 gig kit. And there you could maybe take advantage of some of the good pricing that's still out there for DDR4 memory. But that would be budget step A, and then budget step B would be to take whatever remaining money you have, sell your 3060 Ti 8 gig, and upgrade to the best graphics card you can afford. And I'll talk more about the GPU options in just a moment. The other option, I think, would be to gut the core of this system and upgrade yourself to DDR5 memory, a higher core count processor, and then you would also need to upgrade your motherboard in that case because you have a DDR4 LGA 1700 motherboard and you need a DDR5 compatible LGA 1700 motherboard. So let's see what that would look like. I've stripped out all those parts, and part of the reason I chose this build is because I feel like it has, I don't want to say good bones, because we're really stripping out the bones part of it, but everything else is pretty good. Like, this is a good air cooler that you could reuse on an upgraded CPU. You've got a nice memory configuration. It's a good case. You got a solid 750 watt power supply. You've got some extra fans, so all of this stuff is totally fine to continue working with. The CPU I'd point you towards, which will get you up to 16 cores versus your 10 core, will be the 13700K, and I was like, wow, this is expensive, but I gotta remember we're looking at Canadian pricing here. That's available for just under 500 Canadian. The KF would also be an option since you do have a discrete graphics card for 470, or you could opt for the 14700K or KF, which gets you up to 20 cores. And for that, you've got the KF for 521. I'm gonna say 1400 KF, let's go for that. But any of those would be a nice upgrade. From there, we're gonna choose a motherboard. And here we will want either Z690 or Z790. Either of these chipsets will allow you to overclock the 13700K or 14700K. The Z690 might need a BIOS update to recognize if you go with the 14th gen processor. And then remember, LGA 1700 motherboards can be DDR4 or DDR5 compatible, and our intention here is to upgrade to DDR5, so we're gonna select that. And here we have some reasonable options down in the sub $200 range. Those are all ASRock motherboards. Something like the PG Lightning I think would be a reasonable choice. And then if you wanna stick to one of the big three, MSI, Gigabyte, or Asus, we got a MSI Pro Z790-S Wi-Fi here for $230, or a Gigabyte Z790U DAC, also for $230. I was gonna go with this ASRock board, but I've realized that the reason the price is low is because of a $50 rebate, and it also does not have built-in Wi-Fi. It's easy enough to add Wi-Fi to a motherboard, but if you're shopping for something new, a newer motherboard will have pretty high-end Wi-Fi built in typically, like the Gigabyte Z790 or the MSI Pro. It is a tough call between these. They both have pretty similar feature sets. They both have a couple M.2 slots. I'm gonna go with the MSI Pro because it looks a little bit nicer. It doesn't have that brownish PCB like the Gigabyte one has. And from there, we just need to choose memory. PCPartPicker has a compatibility filter on, so it's already only gonna be showing us DDR5 memory modules, but we do want to choose how much memory we're getting. For 32 gigs total, we'll go with 2x16 gig sticks, and I want at least DDR5 6000 memory, if not faster. From there, we can sort by price, and we can see these kits start at about $130, and they go up from there. And then I would want to choose a kit that somewhat matches your build. We've got like a white Patriot Viper kit here, but then also look at the cast latency, and you want the lowest value here for cast latency possible. So just taking a quick look, for only $5 more than the base cost of the 32 gig DDR5 kit, we've got this G.Skill Ripjaws S5 kit, which is white, so it will match your aesthetic. Good cast latency, good low latency, so we'll add that. So there's your core system upgrade, upgraded CPU, upgraded motherboard, and upgraded memory. If you add up the price of all three of those, it's about, it's looking like $900 Canadian or so, but I would also take your existing CPU, motherboard, and memory and sell those, see if you can recoup some of that cost. And then you would just need to choose a video card. I have two suggestions for a video card in your range. The NVIDIA option I think would be the 4070 Super. That will start out at about $800 Canadian. It's gonna get you 12 gigabytes of VRAM. The benefits here are that you're gonna have access to NVIDIA features like better ray tracing support, as well as a bit broader compatibility with like various video editing programs and stuff thanks to NVIDIA's CUDA implementation. But if you do want a bit more raw rasterization power or more video memory, then the Radeon RX 7800 XT or 7900 GRE are definitely going to be worth considering as well. Make sure the video editing software that you're using plays nice with Radeon GPUs, but here you're going to get 16 gigs of VRAM instead of 12. Base price for the 7800 XT is more than $100 less than the 4070 Super. And then if we scroll down a bit, we can see that the 7900 GREs are starting at about $750 Canadian right now. So that'll be another potential upgrade to consider. Maybe $50 or $60 more Canadian to get yourself the faster 7900 GRE. Okay, so this is my fixed build for NoobSniper. The only other thing I might consider here is going with 64 gigs of DDR5 memory, but a similar configuration to this G.Skill kit, but you'd be spending upwards of $200 for that. So I don't know what the total budget is. Again, if you're really trying to stick to a budget, just go with mostly what you have and upgrade your DDR4 memory. But if you do want a lot more cores and threads for processing, and if you want a lot more gaming performance, then opt for one of these graphics cards and consider the full gut and upgrading yourself to DDR5. Our second build is an upgrade as well from Matthew Smith 22, who does a mixture of game and work, but the work isn't isn't terribly demanding. They're a teacher. Stuff like Word, PowerPoint, Excel, or things that are internet browser based aren't really too much of a concern in terms of performance. If you're buying yourself a gaming PC, then it should be more than powerful enough to handle all of those things. For the gaming monitor, we have 1440p and 165 Hz refresh rate, a similar setup to NoobSniper. And here is the parts list that we are looking at, which I have translated over to PCPartPicker so we can take a closer look. Please note that there wasn't storage included, so I'll add a drive at some point. And we also have a Ryzen 5 3600, which is an older CPU, still available for sale, but when it comes to CPUs that are a little bit older, the prices become a little bit wonky, so I wouldn't pay too close of attention to that. That said, just like the previous build had good, like, anti-bones, I think this build has good bones in terms of the core components. Specifically the motherboard, you have some really good budget choices if you're sticking with AM4. You have a nice solid graphics card, which is like half of the budget right out of the gate because it's a $500 card, but still 7800 XT, really good bang for the buck there. A nice solid case and a 850 watt power supply, although it is, as you mentioned, the Gigabyte P850GM, which hasn't blown up yet. Because if you guys weren't aware, this Gigabyte had a big scandal about this a couple years ago, 3 years ago in 2021, because they were like exploding and doing other things like that. Gigabyte had to offer refunds and exchanges. I hope that you have maybe at least exchanged this unit with Gigabyte and gotten, I mean, they're still selling these, so I hope they've upgraded them so they don't explode anymore. For now, I'm gonna leave the power supply as is because you've been using it. I'm gonna assume that you've either exchanged it for a non-explodey unit or that you're willing to accept the risk, but this would be one of the first things that I'd say, consider swapping that out because I wouldn't want a component like that that can potentially take out other components in my build. But beyond that, since we have a good case, we have a good GPU, let's add some storage. I want like a 2 terabyte NVMe drive, so I'm gonna make the capacity start at 1.6 terabytes. Yes, you want an SSD, and there's a few different ways you can tell it that you want an NVMe SSD, but I'm just gonna go with the M.2 2280 form factor. And then we sort by price per gigabyte, and we can see that the 2 terabyte drives start out at about $95 to $100 right now. Oh, by the way, we're back to US pricing. So I'm glad that these 2 terabyte drives are starting to dip back down. But one thing I wanna note about SSDs is that some SSDs use the NAND flash that's part of the storage, like the 2 terabytes of storage, as a cache, and then some SSDs have a dedicated cache. PCPartPicker does have this listed here, but you gotta scroll down quite a bit before you get to one of those with a dedicated DRAM cache. If you're very concerned about your storage, especially if you do a lot of heavy lifting with it, like a lot of video editing, stuff like that, consider going for an SSD that has dedicated DRAM cache, but you will need to pay more for one of those drives. For most gaming PCs though, you really won't notice a difference between an SSD with or without cache, so I'm just gonna opt for the Team Group MP33, which is a solid entry-level drive, which is right around the base price for a 2 terabyte NVMe right now. Going back to building on the bones of this system, we're gonna upgrade the CPU and potentially the memory as well. You have a good 16 gig kit right here, DDR4 3200, CL16, that's totally fine. I think we're kind of on the cusp right now with memory where a 16 gig memory configuration is still okay, but we're starting to veer towards 32 gigabytes as a recommendation for people who are building new or if you've got a few extra bucks to spend. So along those lines, I'm going to upgrade the memory too. For the CPU upgrade, you basically have two choices that I would recommend, the 5700X3D and the 5800X3D. They're both 8-core, 16-thread processors. The 5800X3D is going to automatically run at a higher frequency, so it's going to be a little bit faster. That said, in terms of gaming performance, it's only going to be a marginal difference between the two of these. So the 5700X3D for about $60, $65 less, I'd say is what I would go for right now, but either of these would be a good choice. And then for memory, we don't want to downgrade you, so we want at least 3200 speed. And then I would go with a 2x16 gig kit. Our compatibility filter will make sure that we're only seeing DDR4 memory for right now. We can sort by price per gigabyte or price. Either way, it will sort things the same way since we're looking at all the same capacity kits. And wow, for DDR4 32 gig kit, starts out pretty low here. We're only in the $50 to $60 range. So we'll even do this and use the cast latency slider to slide that all the way down to, we want something that's no slower than CL16. And then from there, like any of these kits would be totally fine. So, you know, just choose one that aesthetically matches your tastes. You could possibly opt for a brand that you're more familiar with. I've used Team Group, I've used Silicon Power stuff before. The T-Force memory has a nice basic aesthetic, so we'll add that for $56. And here is the fixed build. You're gonna have a really nice bump up with gaming performance in particular, but also going from a 6-core to an 8-core and going from a 3000 series to a 5000 series on the processor. That is a solid upgrade. It's also great that you're going to be able to drop that right into your existing motherboard. Make sure you update the BIOS first before you swap out the CPU. It'll just be a little bit easier that way. Increasing your system memory is a nice option. Again, this is something that you could pass over if you're thinking you don't really need it, but probably something you want to consider in the future. And that rounds things out. We're looking at a total system cost of a little over $1,200, but of course, you already have some of this stuff. 2 more builds to cover. I gotta pick up the pace. These are new builds. This one's from Seamus Lowe for 1440 Gaming. They're planning a dual monitor setup using the 7600S's APU to run my second monitor at 1080p just for YouTube and web browsing. That's not actually necessary. The 7600X does have integrated graphics, but you can run 2 monitors off of your graphics card. That's just fine. Let's take a look at the rest of the build though. We have the 7600X currently going for $200. That is, this, like, if you can't afford the 7800X 3D, 7600X is a good choice, but it's being paired with a $90 all-in-one liquid cooler, and I do think I've got a nice alternative here. I like your other choices though. Nice B650M motherboard for about $144. This is a micro ATX build in the Asus Prime AP201 micro ATX case. I have built a system in this case. It's a really nice combination of only costing about $70, being a fairly good looking case. It doesn't have like a side panel that you can see through, but it's got plenty of ventilation, and that's the main point. Side panels are nice, aesthetics are nice, but this case has good airflow, and I would opt for that. So let's go ahead and edit this list, and I'm going to offer 3 suggestions that I think would be nice upgrades for this system. Your CPU and your cooler are costing you about $300, or at least $295. But check this out, if you're not wholly dedicated to the liquid cooling, and trust me, it's not necessary for these CPUs. These are 65 watt and 105 watt CPUs. They don't need a 360 millimeter all-in-one liquid cooler. So for roughly the same price, I'm gonna upgrade you from a 6-core to an 8-core, and note that they have the same performance boost clock, so you're gonna get pretty much the same performance in terms of gaming out of them. And then we're just gonna pop in a really highly rated air cooler. This is like kind of the go-to air cooler right now, but that's because it's a really nice combination of only costing between $30 and $40 and having really good performance. Do you want RGB or don't you? I'm gonna say, what's the point of RGB when you have a case with a closed side panel? So let's go with the non-RGB version. Second thing I'm looking at here is your graphics card. The 7800 XT is a really good graphics card for around $500. The one you've chosen is $520. So I'd say you have 2 possible choices. One is save yourself $40 or so by going with the ASRock Challenger OC. It's not quite as nicely built of a graphics card, but you are getting the same GPU core and the same memory configuration. So performance is going to be within a couple percentage points. And you're gonna save yourself $40 or so. The other option would be to spend an extra $20 or so, because 7900 GREs start at $550. There was, oh wait, correction, 7900 GRE, again, if you're okay with the ASRock Challenger OC, $540 right there. So that's only 20 bucks more than the GPU you're already looking at. And the 7900 GRE does have a noticeable performance boost over the 7800 XT. The only other thing I might consider is that your power supply here is a good power supply, 850 watts, 80 plus gold. It's $130 though. If we look at 750 watt power supplies, which you should be totally fine with, you only need 700 watts for the 7900 GRE. And even if we're sticking with something that's 80 plus gold rated, we can find some units down in the $70 to $80 range. I'll be honest, I don't usually go for the Apevia options. Ooh, look, a Be Quiet Pure Power 12M. I really like the Be Quiet power supplies because they have really, really quiet fans. They have 0 fan mode too, so it won't spin at all if it doesn't need to. It's got a nice all black cable kit, and this is 30 bucks cheaper than that 850 watt version, and will work just the same. Perhaps even a little bit quieter. So there, that is how I would fix this build. You got an 8-core processor instead of a 6-core. Yes, you don't have an all-in-one liquid cooler, but you have more raw performance, which I consider to be better. And we've also given you a little bit of a GPU upgrade and saved a little money on the power supply, bringing the total in at right around $1,300, which is pretty much the same that we started out with. Our final build is from It's Jakester. Jakester is in his 50s, built the first PC in 2019, watching my videos as well as Kyle's, and they have an NVIDIA RTX 4090 Founders Edition, and it's like a blank canvas. Other than that, iRacing, streaming on Twitch. So first off, it's absurd that the 4090 Founders Edition is over $2,000, but now we have a blank canvas for the rest of the system. Now I could go willy-nilly and just spend gobs of money and be like, here's like an epic over-the-top system, but I thought, no, let's try to be somewhat sensible about this. How can we get the most performance out of a 4090 while spending not like the least amount of money possible, but at like the most reasonable amount of money possible for a balanced system. So let me just run down this list and populate stuff. The CPU choice is obvious. It's right there at the top, the 7800X 3D for less than $400. Yes, we could slap a liquid cooler onto that 7800X 3D, but I'm trying to be sensible here. So I think spending about 40 bucks for cooler is much more sensible. And I know the Thermalright Phantom Spirit has just been highly recommended over and over again, but that's because it's a good choice. I will spend like an extra $8 or $9 on the Evo version, which is a little bit better performing than the SE. There are no prices available right now, which means this must be sold out. To give ourselves an overall price, we can set a custom price with PCPartPicker. There are a few options for how to do that. I'm just gonna manually enter the price. We'll call it $44. For the motherboard, there are two paths we might take. B650 would give us the best bang for the buck, and we could probably find a suitable motherboard for under $200, probably in the 170-ish range, similar to the MSI B650 Gaming Plus Wi-Fi. But you do get a ton more I/O by going with the X670 or X670E chipset, so I'm gonna opt for that. And here we have some Asus Prime options down here, and right around 200 bucks. Gigabyte's Gaming X series typically offers a good amount of performance and features for the money. That's about $225. Similar story with the ASRock Steel Legends series. They have the X670E here. We do have some difficult decisions down here. I'm gonna go for the ASRock. Perhaps this might be controversial from anyone who's had like a negative experience with an ASRock motherboard. That seems to be the case. Either ASRock motherboards work just fine and people are like, why doesn't people like ASRock? Or somebody has an issue with an ASRock board and they never want to use one again. But ASRock's fine. This is fine. Next up is memory. For memory, I'm sticking with the 32 gig kit because for gaming or even gaming and streaming, you shouldn't need much more than that. Consider a 64 gig option as well. But 32 gigs and nice speedy memory that's at least DDR5 6000 and has the tightest timings possible is what I would go for. We got some Lexar Thor OC 32 gig down here for $95. That would be a good choice. Or for about $5 more, we have a Team Group T-Create Expert 32 gig kit. That's also CL32, but it's DDR5 6400. I think I'm gonna go for that. Case choices are always controversial because aesthetic tastes come into play, and some people like how some cases look and some people don't like how some cases look. I am still a big fan of the Fractal Design Torrent because it has really good airflow, plenty of room to work in. It is a bit more expensive, getting close to $200, selling for about $190 right now. That said, in terms of like making it an easy build, having really good airflow, especially for the 4090, and being able to fit everything comfortably, that would be my choice. Oops, we almost forgot storage. Since I already talked about storage, I'm just gonna go with that same 2 terabyte drive. And lastly, power supply. Here's where I would opt for at least an 850 watt model. And once again, since we're working with the 4090, we want to go with gold or better. So here, once again, we have some cheaper options, but like I always say, never skimp on the power supply. The Thermaltake Tough Power GX3 would be a nice sort of budget-ish option here. It is not modular and it's not the fanciest unit. There's a 2024 model of the Tough Power GF1, but actually, since we're working with an NVIDIA RTX 40 series graphics card, what I would want is a native connector from the power supply for that GPU. So those are the older PCIe 12-pin connectors. We want at least the 12 plus 4-pin 12VH power, and we want at least one of those. If we can find a power supply that's ATX 3.1 compatible, that would be even better. Actually, I guess the Tough Power GX3 does have a 12VH power connector, so that does remain like the budget choice for around $90 here. We could scroll down and go through individually these power supplies and look for one that is ATX 3.1 compatible versus ATX 3.0. That said, with the 12VH power connectors, as long as you make sure that they are seated all the way, you shouldn't have too much concern about some of those problems that have been happening in the past couple years. So because this is already running pretty long, I'm gonna choose that. And then here is the build that I would build around an NVIDIA Founders Edition RTX 4090, which is really funny because the rest of the build is only about like $1,200, and then the 4090 is like $2,125, at least if you have to buy the Founders Edition right now. If you do want to build with an RTX 4090 right now, because you want the best GPU that's available, you don't need to pay over $2,000 for it. You still got to pay over MSRP, but there are some models available around $1,800-ish, and I would opt for one of those. That said, here is my final fixed build with the 7800X 3D based RTX 4090 system for around 3 grand. Over 3 grand if you need the Founders Edition. You can get it under 3 grand if you go with one of those other options I pointed out. And that is gonna wrap it up for Build Fix episode number 2. I wanna say a huge thank you to PCPartPicker for sponsoring this series, and of course, powering this series with their excellent website that allows you to choose the parts that you need, swap things out, do price comparison, and also look at price history. Once again, I will post links as well as the full parts lists down in the video's description if you want to check those out. You can also find a link to my store down there at paulshardware.net, where you can help support my channel by buying yourself some awesome merchandise, t-shirts, hoodies, beer sets, and more. If you want to hit the thumbs up button on this video if you enjoyed it, definitely do that. And subscribe to my channel if you're not already, so you can see when my community post goes up for the next episode of Build Fix, so you can submit your parts list and maybe I will try to fix that one too. Thank you so much for watching this video, and we'll see you all in the next one.